What do you do on Sundays?
We talk about Cate Blanchett, the acting, the costumes, the awards, but mostly the Blanchett of it all.
I'm not acting.
You think this is a love affair?
I saw you, Erica. Meeting in the middle.
This is Sundays with Cate, and I'm your host, Murtada Elfadl. Welcome to Sundays with Cate. We are taking a break this week, and this is a special bonus episode as I have been living and breathing Sundance movies for the last 7 days, 6.5 days. I couldn't think of any other movies, so I want you all to know what I've been watching. And I have invited a special guest, writer and critic, Valerie Complex. Hi, Valerie.
What's up? Thank you for having me back. I remember our discussion about Little Fish.
Yes, that was one of my favorite episodes when we discussed that little seen Australian movie.
People were shocked that I had even seen it, to be honest. And I get it. Like, I know it was a film that not too many people saw. So
yeah. So we're not talking about a Cate Blanchett movie this week. We're talking about all the movies at Sundance. And so Sundance this year was a virtual festival. So we were all sitting wherever it is that we sit every day. We're all inside. And just there was an added bonus of watching these movies that just became available. I have to give Sundance kudos for the virtual experience was amazing. Literally, you 2 clicks and you're watching. Like, go to the movie, favorite it, and it appears on your schedule. Then you click it and watch it. They cracked the code on virtual festivals. I've been to many over the past year, and this was the best.
It took a while to get used to at the beginning with films and stuff. And then I had complications with, for some reason, the films that I reserved kept dropping off my schedule. And I had to email them like, what are you going to do? Because I have proof that I reserved these films, but they're not showing up on my schedule. So what's the problem? And then they ended up upgrading me to all access. So that made it easier.
Yeah. This was my first year getting all access. I always got the pass that you have to go an hour before the movie and wait in line. But this time I got the all access. So it was nice.
Well, you deserve it. You produce the amount of work that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So you should be proud of that.
I am. It was nice. The all access was very nice. But, people are here to listen to us talk about the movies. So let's dive into the movies. And first, Valerie, I just wanted to talk about like trends that you notice in the films that we watch. Obviously, this was the number of movies were less than usual, but this is still a huge number of movies. Nobody has seen everything. So I think between us, we've seen probably a lot, but we still have we won't cover everything. But my first trend that I noticed, and this is a trend that just every year at Sundance, I think it's the same, but maybe a slightly more noticeable this year, is that the documentaries to me were much more interesting and better than the narrative movies. Like so many of the documentaries, there was innovation. We saw a documentary in animation. We saw a lot of good archival footage documentaries, and even the talking head documentaries were good. And there was things like Captains of Zaatari and Sabaya are these documentaries that were shot in Iraq and in Jordan that looked and felt like narrative movies because they just plunge you into the story. There is no talking head telling you. Like that was, to me, that the innovation in documentary is something that I really noticed this year.
I don't know, I feel like it's ongoing with the trend that's been happening since last year. I felt a lot of the films that I saw, and some of them in my top 20 are documentaries. Actually, documentaries dominate my top 10 because they were just much better last year. They were riskier. They told a variety of stories featuring a variety of different people. And I think Sundance is just kind of continuing that tradition of where documentaries are just a lot better. And I know you mentioned this earlier, but I agree with you. I felt like a lot of American cinema was lazy. It was the same sort of narratives over and over. There were a few movies where people tried to do different things with typically formulaic stories.
Hmm.
Violation, for example, and even to an extent, Flea, which plays with genre and stuff like that. Most of the films were sort of kind of like middle of the road and not interesting at all.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. The narrative films, especially the American narrative films, with for very few exceptions, everything was been there, done that. And I'll mention a couple since we're not, so let's get into a couple of them. So one movie that I enjoyed watching is Together, which is a movie directed by Nicole Beckwith, and this is I don't know if you saw that. Did you get to see that?
no, I will say that when I'm physically at Sundance, like I don't see very much. I think the most movies I'll see is maybe 6 or 7 because that in between parties and other commitments, you don't
Hmm.
see that much. But this is the most I've ever seen at a film festival.
How
So I'm happy
many?
about that. Happy.
That's great. Yeah, I think I've seen more this year than I've seen last year because you cut down the time of like going from one theater to the other and the bus
Right, right, right,
shuttles and all of that and the
right,
parties and then you can wake up and immediately watch a movie even at 8 a.m. if you want.
right. You don't have to like get up and wonder if you're gonna miss the bus.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this trend of like American movies of been there, done that. So one movie that was quite charming is Together. This is a movie directed by Nicole Beckwith, and it is a movie about a man in his mid-40s who hires a younger woman to be a surrogate because he's single and um, wants to have a child on his own. And it's about the friendship that sort of comes between these two. The movie was very charming. The performances by Ed Helms and particularly Patty Harrison were really
Mhm.
charming. And I laughed, but I also felt like this is the quintessential Sundance movie that I have seen a million times before.
Yeah.
So
No,
there is,
it's like every year a Juno,
yeah,
um, every year.
there there is one every year. Um, and another one that I will highlight is also one called How It Ends, and this is directed by Zoe Lister-Jones and Daryl Wayne. And
Mhm.
this movie was the this was such an LA story. Like I kept rolling my eyes. There's so many things, during this movie, and it's just like I'm like, well, good job, Sundance. You gave New Yorkers a new LA movie for us to mock. But
Right.
again, it was fun. It was fleeting. I didn't want to turn it off. I enjoyed it. But like, where are these movies going to go? Who's the audience for these been there, done that stories?
Hmm.
So, um, you know, but let's talk about stuff we liked. So we talked about the innovation in documentary, and I think my favorite movie at the festival was Flea.
Hmm.
Um,
Probably mine too.
yeah, so Flea is a documentary told in animation, and it is directed. It's a Danish film. It's directed by Jonas Poher Rasmussen. Hopefully, I got that right. But anyway, it's a story. He's a filmmaker who, when he was in high school, befriended um, a refugee from Afghanistan. His name is Amin. And this was about 20, 25 years ago when they were in high school. They are in their late 30s, early 40s right now. So, and throughout this whole time, they became best friends and they became good friends throughout the year. Amin never told his friend his story
Hmm.
about how he came from Kabul to Copenhagen and what was the journey that got him there. And so he finally told him the story. And so the filmmaker tells the story in animation, and it's beautiful animation. It tells the story of the civil war in Afghanistan and the journey that Amin and his family take through Russia, through through being smuggled into Scandinavia, and how they lost each other and found each other again, and how he, because of the oppressive immigration systems everywhere in Europe, even countries that welcome refugees more than America does, I assume Denmark does, they
Hmm.
also, their systems are still oppressive. So you can never tell your story because then that any shred of truth can be taken against you. And so
Right.
this, as somebody who migrated myself, it just felt very personal to me. It's also a queer story. I mean, it's
Mhm.
queer, and part of the narrative is coming to accept that he's queer. It's something that he struggled with and wanted to be cured from, and also how his family reacts to his being queer. So it just was a wonderful movie. What did you think of it?
It was one of the films where I didn't want to fast forward, because you have that option, being at home. And I
Yeah.
was, wow, I sat all the way through that. I didn't like check my phone or anything like that. I was fully engaged in what was happening. I really like the fact that it played with genre. You have documentary animation that's a crossover that I don't think I've ever seen before.
Hmm.
Maybe it exists, but it's a crossover that I haven't seen. And the story is compelling, but it's hopeful. A lot of these refugee sort of stories end in tragedy most of the time. But this one is like, oh, everybody's alive and everybody's thriving. They're just scattered all over the place. That made me feel like, it was a film that I walked away from feeling good,
Yeah.
based on the conclusion, not going through the rest of it. Going through it, it was rough, but you really feel like you're there with the main character going through the same things that he's going through.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a uh, in your shoes moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a lot of just nostalgic 80s and 90s music, which is the time when Amin and his friend were young. So you get to hear Aha and Roxette, a lot of these Scandinavian bands. So even the
Right.
soundtrack was interesting. And the story is just poignant and beautiful. It's a story of family, of separation, of leaving behind everything because you have no other choice. So it's heartbreaking, but there was a lot of joy in it. And I think it's a movie we're going to hear a lot about. I understand that.
Yeah, Neon bought it, I
Yes,
think.
Neon bought it. And I think they're going to dub it in English with Riz Ahmed doing the narration.
I mean, I don't think that's necessary, but okay.
I know. I mean, people can read the subtitles, right? They should just leave it in Danish. But
Yeah, people don't like reading apparently. So
yeah, yes. But anyway, Flea is definitely my favorite movie of the festival. And so if I thought as a fun exercise, as we're going, we could give our awards. So Flea is definitely my best documentary. What is your best documentary, Valerie?
it's gonna be Flea.
Yeah. Another movie that I wanted to mention is Captains of Zaatari, which I mentioned earlier a little bit. This is a movie that follows two refugees in a camp, Syrian refugees in a camp in Jordan,
Mhm.
and they get chosen to go on this to play in the soccer championship in Qatar. And this movie, what I loved about it is that for so much of its running time, it plays like a narrative movie. And so nobody is talking to the camera. Nobody is telling me what is happening. There is no narration. It's just the director following these two young men as they grapple with their daily life on the soccer field, with their friends, with their family. One of their parents is sick, and as they travel, and as their world, goes slightly bigger. Like there is again, like Flea, there is this note of hope in it. So their world is at first confined to this refugee camp, and then they are playing in this championship, and you can see like the effect of how this world has expanded and how that affects their perspective. And I just loved this movie, and I thought it was also an innovative documentary. So what other documentaries did you like?
Others did I? Oh, I thought Misha and the Wolves was kind of crazy.
I haven't seen that one, so tell me what's that one about?
It's basically about this woman who told a story about how her parents were killed in Nazi Germany. I mean, and, during the occupation of the Nazis um, in Belgium. And she told them that she went to go stay with a foster family, and she didn't like the foster family. And so she went to live in the woods, and she became part of a pack of wolves who took care of her for however long. And then she came to the States and met this woman, and the woman was like, let's turn this into a book.
Mm.
And she wrote the book, and it became a bestseller, and they were going to go on Oprah. And she turned down going on Oprah about her book.
Oh,
And
wow.
then her agent, she ended up suing her agent for whatever, for $24 million, and won. And her agent was like, something's not clicking. So they do some investigation on the story, and yeah, some stuff comes up. I don't want to give it away.
All right.
Really
And
good.
this movie is also going to be on Netflix, right? So people
Right.
hopefully can see it soon.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of Tiger King, but a little bit more compact,
mm,
uh, more compelling, not
mhm.
as trashy. But it has quite a twist.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to that when it comes. I'm going to look forward for the twist. I think a movie that we, before we hit record, we were talking about that we both like The Summer of Soul. Um,
And I just saw that last night. That was literally my last film of the festival. And I have lived 5 blocks from the park where the festival happened for 20 years and never knew about that festival until I watched that documentary. It's
yeah,
embarrassing.
it's so embarrassing. So, just to give the listeners the idea, Summer of Soul is a documentary by Amir Questlove Thompson. That's his full name. You may know him as Questlove. And this is a documentary about the Harlem Cultural Festival, which is a festival that happened in 1969 in Harlem that had the same year as Woodstock. But because it was an event by Black people for Black people, it was, of course, erased from history. So what he has is the archival footage of people like Sly and the Family Stone, Nina Simone, a
That is
young,
right.
yeah, Nina was amazing.
Stevie Wonder and yeah, oh yeah.
Mavis Staples and and Mahalia Jackson. So all this footage, and then there are people who were there 50 years ago. Some of them were very young. One of the people who talks there was 6 years old when that happened, because it was more than 50 years ago. So he has all these people who were there talking about the feel of being in the crowd, of the fashion, of how they felt that day. And then he has the King, which is the footage of all these performances that
Right.
for a long time you just watched the whole set. Like, I think we watched the whole set of Nina Simone because it was 3 songs. So it's just a wonderful documentary. I don't want to use like the terms that they sent you in their emails, but the email call it the euphoric documentary, and I think that is the right word to use for it.
Right.
So that was another documentary that we both enjoyed. Let's talk about some narratives. So if I was going to give an acting award, I would give Best Actor to Clifton Collins in Jockey. It's a movie about a jockey. It's basically a character study about this man in his late middle age who was a jockey all his life, and now his body's sort of giving out and he can't ride anymore. And it's about his relationship with a younger jockey that he's mentoring, and it's about relationship with his boss in the racetrack, who is sort of she's not just his boss, she's his friend too, because they've worked together for a long time. And it is just wonderful to see an actor like Clifton Collins Jr., who you've seen in many movies, playing supporting roles, get the lead and such a great character to play. And he really sinks his teeth in it, and it's a wonderful performance. It's multi-layered, it's very quiet, and it's a very physical performance in that you see the years and you see the wear and tear to his body just in the way he walks and moves. So Clifton Collins Jr., congratulations. Sundays with Kate gives you Best Actor at Sundance.
Is he Latinx, or I know he gets cast as one a lot, but I don't.
I think he is, yes. It says his father is of German descent and his mother is of Mexican ancestry,
Okay.
according to Wikipedia. So, Valerie, in the movies you saw, is there an actor you want to highlight?
I got to give it to Daniel Kaluuya for Judas and the Black Messiah. Although the movie's lacking in a lot of areas, that he gives a magnetic performance. And it seems like every role that he's in, he just continues to get better and better and better. There's nothing that he can't do.
Yeah, he's
He's
wonderful.
very exciting to watch. I don't know. He just has so much charisma, and it's hard to look away. He's pretty irresistible. You can't take your eyes off him.
Yeah, and he plays Fred Hampton in Judas and the Black Messiah, which is the story of the last few months in Fred Hampton's life and how he was murdered by the FBI. It's a hard movie to watch. I watched it before Sundance, so I didn't think of it as a Sundance movie, but yes, it did play there. And yeah, I agree with you. Daniel Kaluuya is amazing, and I think he got nominations at the Golden Globes and SAG. So hopefully he is being recognized for this performance. I've always loved him. I thought he should have won the Oscar for Get Out. But maybe he'll win this year.
He's got to win something because I don't know. I can't think of a performance by a male, a supporting role. Is he supporting or best? I don't remember.
He's playing in supporting. Yeah,
Okay,
he's
yeah.
being run in supporting.
No one has done better
Yeah, I
in a
agree.
supporting role this year. You can't. It's unfathomable to think that anybody was better than than he was this year.
Yeah, it's a wonderful performance, but it's also a performance that, he shows you how magnetic Fred Hampton was, right? Like in those scenes where he's giving the speeches, like you can feel him leap off the screen. I know this is like, I think that people say that's an easy thing to say, but it literally, you feel the strengths, the passion of this man, and you're right, you can't take your eyes off him. He's really great in it.
He's fantastic. So he wins mine.
All right. But this is a podcast about an actress. And I think most people here want to hear us talk about actresses. So let's talk about the movie that has actresses that I will give it best narrative film at this festival, which is Passing. It's a movie that stars Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga as two light-skinned Black women in 1927 Harlem, who pass as white. One of them, played by Tessa Thompson, is the lead character. She passes as white sometimes for convenience, like if she just wants to go to an all-white hotel and relax for a few minutes. The other, Claire, played by Ruth Negga, passes all the time. In fact, she is married to a white man who doesn't know that she's Black. And so the movie is about race. It's about identity. It's about the masks we put on and take off. It's about desire. These women are into each other as friends, but they also want to trade places. Sometimes I think Irene, the Tessa Thompson character, admires the chutzpah and the chaos of the other woman, and vice versa. I think Claire also admires that Irene is satisfied with her lot in life and seems calm. And so there is a lot in this movie, and a lot of it is left unsaid. The script is very sparse. I love that. I didn't need it to. It's like whenever there is a chance for it to tell us anything, it sort of holds back and does it. But the performances are wonderful, particularly Ruth Negga, who I'll give Best Actress because she is playing somebody who is a little unhinged because of the way that she's living, but she has such control as an actor. Like she drops her voice sometimes to make the point, or she looks straight into the camera. And the way that she looks at the camera, you completely change every idea you thought you knew. You thought you knew this character, or you thought you knew this story. And the way that she just looks straight at the camera, it completely changed that for me. In a very pivotal scene later in the movie. And then I think it's a wonderful performance. What did you think of Passing, Valerie?
I would definitely give Ruth Negga Best Actress. I mean, she really, I said in my review, I'm looking for my review now. She bulldozes through each scene with that, what did I say? It was with chaotic, sedity energy. That's what I said.
She does. That is really good. Yeah.
With chaotic, sedity energy that just sort of bulldozes its way through every scene. She's irresistible. Like I don't see how even Tessa Thompson didn't fall under her spell, because her performance is so sensual and intimate and alluring.
Yeah.
She's
Absolutely.
just one of those actresses
Yeah.
where you she gets on screen and you follow her throughout the scene and nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Um,
You're afraid to look away in case she does a gesture that you miss. Like I was just transfixed.
Yeah, exactly. It was a transfixing experience, and I was just like, I wanted to see Passing again because I just want to see the scenes that she's in.
Mm-hmm.
And she translates so much on her face. Like, I know the story, to me, the Passing story is lacking in substance. I think it was a very spirited first try from Rebecca Hall. And I think as a director, technically, she has a very good eye for things. And she really thought of every detail down to the costuming, the set design, even the language that they spoke. Like she thought of everything. It was just that story. And I just think that for someone in her position, passing was a tall order. And I sit and I wonder, I'm like, what would that have looked like if a Black woman wrote it and Rebecca Hall directed it? Imagine the symbiotic relationship that would, and how much better the film would have been, because I gave it a B rating. But Ruth Negga, man, like at the end, I just want to talk about the end scene when Blank comes through the door, right?
Yes.
And she gives Tessa Thompson, whose character's name is Irene, this look.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit. I was like, so she basically gave her a look of forgiveness, even though she doesn't know why that person is there. She looks at Irene like, I forgive you despite what's going on, even though it's not Irene's fault. And it was just that scene, that glance, that look between them that I was like, wow, okay, this is mind blowing. And that's why I wrote that tweet. I was like, she about to ride this to an Oscar, because
she's wonderful. Like that's the look I was talking about too. That look. And then the thing is, she's looking at Irene, but in fact, she's looking straight at the camera. So she's looking at the audience. And so it's so, like, I thought about it because then something happens and the movie ends. And to me, this is why the ending is so strong. It's because of that look, because of Ruth Negga, because you can read it so many ways. Like you said, it can be forgiveness. She's forgiving Irene. Or it can be like about what happens next. This is maybe the moment she decided to do something. So it could be so many things. And this is why this performance is just so staggering.
I wanted to ask you, do you think this is a queer movie?
I did think it's a queer movie. I have read the book that it's based on. So the sort of desire and sexual subtext is in the book. But I think it becomes more apparent in the movie because of the performances. Because every time these women look at each other, there is fleeting touches here and there. It is not explicit at all. But the way Tessa Thompson and especially Ruth Negga look at each other, there is a lot there. You can see it as, which is why I love the ambiguity in the movie. You can see it as these women want each other's life. So something like, I want to be you, or, do you want to be me? Or you could see it as sexual desire. And I think there is a lot of the time I felt the desire that they have for each other.
And it's like the way that Rebecca Hall sort of films it. I mean, it's absolutely shot and acted from the female gaze. In that one scene where they're at the party and you see the camera panning down her backless dress, Claire's backless dress, and then she grabs her hand, and it's like, okay, well, I mean, it's pretty clear that either something did happen between them or something is sort of brewing between them. And it was, again, that look that they sort of gave to one another. But as the film goes on, the female gaze becomes really violent. And I think that that's an important thing that people are not talking about as much as they should be. And how, not every queer film is going to be Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And sometimes the gaze is super aggressive and egregious. And I think Rebecca Hall kind of gets that point across. Like, what happens when two women look at each other in a very violent and almost an almost objectifying way? What are the results of that? So that was one of the aspects I really did like about the film. That it shows another side of the female gaze that isn't often pointed out.
And I love what you said about it being a violent look, because sometimes I was like, do you want to fuck her or do you want to kill her? And it could be both.
It could be both, right?
Right. Because the movie also, like, I think, I don't know if you saw the Q&A, but Rebecca Hall talked about being inspired by Hitchcock, which I'm like, every filmmaker is, Rebecca, not just you. But there is a there is a little bit of Hitchcock in there, in the way that these women maybe want to change places, and they don't there is no way for them to change places except if they remove one of them, right? So there is that definitely, and you see it also in the intimate relationship that the Rusneka character builds with Irene's husband, played by Andre Holland, which we never see because the movie always follows Irene's perspective. So she's always coming into the room and seeing Andre and Ruth in these intimate situations where they're whispering into each other's ears, and they're sometimes not touching, but they're very close physically to each other. And we never sort of get beyond that, but you could read that as Claire trying to make Irene jealous because she desires her by showing her that maybe she desires her husband, or you could see it as maybe Claire trying to take Irene's place. And and in both cases, to your point, it's violent.
But you could also see it as that's Irene seeing what she wants to see. She's not a terribly reliable narrator. At least I don't think so.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I think that that's also a kind of cool point that Rebecca Hall does, is creating this thing where we don't know. Because she's by that point, she's so obsessed with Claire. We don't know what the truth is.
Yeah.
And the only way I was able to sort of gauge what was happening there was at the end when they were going up the stairs to the party, and Claire said something like, I'm gonna, she's like, well, what if your husband finds out? And it's like, well, I'll just move up to Harlem and be with you. And I was like, I felt like she meant that, like be with her specifically.
Yeah.
Not the husband. I don't know. Everybody interprets that
different. And that's why I love the movie, because you can have your whole experience with it and see things, and like you and I both saw this sexual subtext, but a lot of people didn't.
Huh?
Yeah, I know.
You'd have to be like gay to see that, because like it was pretty obvious. I thought.
Yeah, to me too. But I haven't read any reviews, but just looking at Twitter, some people were saying they didn't notice that. So. And I'm just like, this is why this movie like needs to be seen. Like, you need to pay attention, and not to what the actors are saying, but to the performances they're giving.
Yeah. There's a lot of answers there. You got to be looking.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely my favorite narrative film. And we both give Ruth Negga actress of Sundance, and maybe actress of the year. I don't know. Will there ever be a better performance in 2021? I doubt it.
I will say I really don't think so. I really doubt it. Not. They would be best to put her in the supporting category, though. That's my personal.
I mean, she's, the movie is from the Tessa Thompson perspective, and she's not in it as much as Tessa Thompson, who's in every scene.
Right. My favorite narrative film, I unfortunately don't have one, because I thought everything was pretty middle of the road, with the exceptions of a few that I just didn't like at all. Everything was pretty
mediocre.
Yes. And, like we talked about in the beginning, everything was sort of like formulaic, and, like Coda, for example, like I thought Coda was cute. I thought the lead actress has a very pretty voice. But been there, done that, and they're just sort of deaf. And I think the representation is there. I think the representation is accurate and solid. I just didn't feel what everybody else was feeling. Same with Math.
Yeah. I want to say about Coda, like, what was the jury thinking? Like, there were 20 movies maybe in the US dramatic competition, and you give every award to Coda? Did you finish any other movie? So Coda is cute, and to your point, we love the representation, but it's really a sort of movie that is just about making the audience feel good, which I get it. It won the audience award. Why does it need to win writing, directing, and acting? It was just too much. And also, it's one of those movies that sort of neatly fixes everything. All the problems it introduces in Act 1 are neatly fixed and resolved by Act 3. And that's always like, life is not like that. But I guess it's not life, it's a movie. But in the end, it has two strong scenes, I thought, and maybe that's all it needed, because those scenes really move you. And I think we were talking before we got on mic that
Is it the scene when she was singing for her father?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very moving, and I teared up too. It's
Yeah.
moving, and yes, that's where you hook the audience, absolutely. So I get winning the audience award, but the rest I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't, whatever. I don't get it either. I just
Um,
always see films like that as like, what is different? Like, where's the real conflict? There's stakes, but they're not high stakes because this is a rather privileged child. So if she doesn't go to school right now, she'll go later and
yeah.
her life will still be fine. I don't know. Whatever. Moving on.
Yeah. Well, Coda, I think a lot of people are going to enjoy. It's going to be on Apple. So it's a cute movie. The other movie that people seem to have flipped over for is completely different than Coda. It's not an audience pleasing movie at all. It's Mass. And this is a movie about two sets of parents who are involved in, their kids were involved in a school shooting. So one set of parents are the parents of the killer, and the other two are the parents of one of the young people who died in the school shooting. And so they meet in a church basement to talk years after that tragedy happened, and to sort of iron out differences, come to some forgiveness, reconciliation. It's a movie to me that was uh, it's brutal psychologically because of the subject matter, and the actors are committed. Jason Isaacs, Marsha Plimpton, Ann Dowd, and Bob Burney. All four
Mm.
actors are really committed. But it left me really cold for two reasons. One, I thought that there were no characters here. There were just four archetypes: angry dad, angry mom, asshole dad, and Ann Dowd.
Asshole dad and down.
So okay, like the actors are good, but did you write them any characters? I didn't think that Fran Kranz, who's the writer director, did that at all. And then also, I was troubled by the ending because it neatly, and I'm going to spoil here, so skip 30 seconds if you don't want to know what happens. There is a hug, and I'm just like, if your son killed my son, I'm not hugging you. Like, that is never gonna happen. I may forgive you, but I'm not gonna hug you. Like that, and especially the woman played by Marsha Plimpton, that woman would not hug Ann Dowd, never. So that really troubled me.
Like I said, and down doesn't miss.
No.
Uh, she does not have a bad performance. So if I had to say, like, a runner up to Ruth Negga, it would be Ann Dowd.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it seems like she did most of the talking. She is the film.
Yeah, she was on a different rhythm than the other actors, and that character probably would be on a different rhythm because she's the
Mhm.
one who sort of feels the tragedy, who sort of feels a lot of things. Like, she feels guilt and she feels remorse, and she is the one, like, unlike her husband, who kind of doesn't want to take responsibility. She's taking responsibility for the fact that she raised this person who then killed all these other people. So yeah, I agree, but I want to give this film my award for when great acting is not enough.
The Great Acting Not Enough Award.
Yes. And
Oh,
so I want to end, Valerie, by talking about movies that surprised us. So was there a movie at Sundance that you watched that you had no expectations, or you had maybe expectations that were completely turned around when you watched it and it was surprising to you?
besides Flea, I gotta say Violation. Um, it's you know, it's another sort of middle of the road film that I would definitely give a B or B minus. But the way that it's a formulaic story told in a non-linear way.
Mhm.
And by the time you get to the ending, you're like, oh shit. You're just like, whoa. Did not see that coming because it has a pretty electrifying third act that manages to save the film
Yeah.
because the first act is pretty good and then the second act is long and it drags. But by the time it hits that third act, things go 180 degrees left, and you're like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
where did that come from? So I was
Exactly.
really, really surprised about how much I liked that. Um,
Yeah, I liked it too. So Violation, if you haven't heard of, it's a movie about two groups, two sisters and their significant others. I think one couple is married and the other isn't. And so going to a weekend together, and something happens between one of the sisters and the husband of her sister, and the repercussions from that, which sort of takes a toll on both couples, and we are then taken to maybe a year later or 6 months later, and some time has passed, and one of the sisters is exacting revenge on what transpired that night. And it starts in the middle and it goes back and forth, and you're never sure which timeline you're at or what you're doing. It's a debut movie, and I think those directors really showed what they could do as directors.
mhm.
Although what I would say about it is that it felt to me like it's a reel for a new director. Like there was a lot of flourishes to the direction, and there's a lot of cutting to insects and animals, and so it's something, a first time director should maybe avoid that. I think it was. I wasn't as immersed into the story because I felt that the directors were showing off a little bit,
There
a lot
was
of the time.
there, yeah, and I always think showing off comes off as amateur, um, in my personal opinion, and it takes you out of the story. It takes you out, and then you got to get back into it. And as soon as you get back
Hmm.
into it, there goes something else. However, I guess I see what they were trying to do. Violation is supposed to be surrealist
Mm.
in a way, shape, or form. I felt like I was watching a Salvatore Dali movie. Uh, just like all these shots just sort of thrown together, and with no goal in
Hmm.
mind. So I see what they were trying to do. It wasn't necessarily effective.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
For my surprise, I would say is the movie Pleasure, which is a Swedish movie about a sex worker who arrives in LA, and she's trying to break into porn. And what was surprising about this movie is I didn't know about it at all, and I just clicked on it because of the premise, and I was like, "Oh, this might be interesting," and because I wanted to see more non-American movies.
Hmm.
And so it was such an honest depiction of that journey, and I thought
Hmm.
the actress, I think her name is Sophia. Ooh,
Capital.
Sophia what? Capel.
Capital. Yeah.
Sophia Capel was really good. Like if there is another performance other than Bruce Negga and Daniel Kaluuya and Clifton Collins Jr., I would say she was really wonderful. And the movie is very like it's really struck me. The honesty of depicting that journey really struck me, and it was very surprising.
I think pleasure was so real and honest that sometimes I forgot I was watching a narrative film.
Mm,
I had to keep checking myself because I'm like, is this a fucking documentary? Like, what is going? Like, I was like, where does real end and fake begin? Like, where? Because I saw people who I noticed, and I just wasn't sure. And I have a lot of friends that are sex workers and stuff like that. So I
mhm,
thought that the depiction was true to scale. The only thing that confused me was the ending, but then I figured it out. So I was like, okay, well,
yeah.
I mean, this is a cool way to end it. Like the music was great. Like it was a very millennial film. I don't know. It doesn't. I feel like it glorifies the porn industry and then demonizes it at the same time, which I thought was a pretty decent balance because there are people who enjoy it and there are people
Mhm,
who don't enjoy it.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think, and I get what you were saying about is this a documentary, is it narrative? Because it's populated with a lot of porn actors who are
yeah,
playing a lot of the other characters that she meets in during this time that she spends in LA.
right, right. It's a rough business.
It is. It's very
Um,
rough, and the movie doesn't shy away from that.
but that actor, like, I had to ask because I was like, "Are you a porn star?" Like, I wasn't sure. I asked Sophia Coppola. She was like, "I am not." She was like, thank you for the kind words. I'm like, oh, child, I'm embarrassed, but I had to ask.
Where did you ask it? Was this at the Q&A?
No, this was on Twitter.
Oh.
This was on Twitter. I was like, hey, I even like untagged her from the question. And I was like, is she a porn star? I had asked somebody else and she saw it. And I was like, oh, girl, I'm embarrassed, but I had to ask.
Yeah. Well, she was good. She convinced you.
Yeah. Yeah. She's very convincing. And her performance kind of reminded me of Bria, I think her name is Bria Vinite.
Yes, from the Sean Baker movie. Yeah.
Yeah, from the Florida Project.
The Florida Project.
You know, in that sort of, fledgling new actress, eccentric tattoos and a way of speech and being that is all their own. But it fits within the sense of the story. I don't know. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah. I enjoyed it too. So is there any movie that we haven't talked about that you want to mention before we go, Valerie?
Let's talk about some bad ones.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. I don't know what happened. In the Earth is terrible. I really like.
Is that the Ben Wheatley movie?
Yeah. I really like the fact that there was a brown woman who was a hero, but Wheatley has been on a long losing streak. And I don't know, like I thought the film was all over the place even for him.
Oh,
because
wow.
I liked his first film, The Kill List. I liked High Rise. I've liked some of the films he's produced. I thought Free Fire was okay, but he's been on a losing streak. Rebecca was bad.
Oh God, yes. The worst movie ever. And that's why I didn't even try to watch this, because I'm like, you burnt me very recently, Ben Wheatley. I am not watching this.
I just, I hadn't seen Rebecca. I'd heard all the bad things, so I was just like, whatever. But I know he does horror semi-well, but it was just like this weird mashup of Annihilation and The Happening, and it just didn't work, and it was way too long. But I really did like the fact that a brown woman was in the lead, and that's why it didn't get an F. It got a D.
Okay. Did you see John in the Hole?
No,
That was the worst movie at Sundance. Don't see it. I don't even want to waste my time on it. I don't know what is John or what he was doing in the hole. It's about this young man, a boy who finds a hole in the backyard and then decides that he's had it with his parents and sister and drugs them and puts them in the hole. And that's it. It's the worst movie at Sundance. I don't even want to say more about it.
I guess if I had to describe In the Earth is like this pandemic-esque film. There's a pandemic going on and they're all wearing masks, and then they get into the woods and they meet this guy, and plants are communicating with it makes no sense. It's stupid. So I recommend skipping that. I really didn't like Son of Monarchs. But I also I've chalked it up to I don't think the film is for me, and that's fine.
This is the movie about a Mexican scientist in New York, and sort of he doesn't belong in New York, but he also doesn't belong back with his family in Mexico. That's the one, right?
Right.
I've seen it. Yeah.
It felt like it was trying to capture that Roma, and what was that other film that came out last year? The queer Mexican one. You're Always With Me.
I Carry You With Me.
I Carry You With Me. And it feels like it was trying to like capitalize on that, and it just didn't really work.
Yeah, I agree.
And then with the appearance of his girlfriend, it just really took me out the film, and I just really wasn't interested in it. I don't think super great storytelling. I thought the editing was all over the place. It seemed really amateur.
Yeah, the rhythm of it also wasn't engaging. I think your point about the editing is spot on, because it didn't engage you to like continue to pay attention to the story, because it was kind of languid and it was kind of all over the place. So it needed to be tighter.
The World to Come. That's not a film I dislike. I thought it was pretty middle of the road though. You can tell that it was written by men, and
So this is the Mona Fastol movie.
Another period lesbian piece.
With Vanessa Kirby and Catherine Waterston.
I think Catherine Waterston gives a career best performance. I think Vanessa Kirby is great. But I think a lot of people purposely skipped it because Casey Affleck is involved. So that's going to hurt the film, which sucks because I think people should see it.
Yeah.
Just for its romantic bits. But I gave it a B- because I just didn't like the third act. I thought the third act was bad. So
I thought the filmmaking was pretty good. Like
the filmmaking is great.
Yeah, it's like she's a good filmmaker. Like she's a good storyteller. Like this was one of the movies that I was like, oh, this is somebody this is a director I'm gonna see their next movie for sure.
And I wonder if what it would have looked like if a woman wrote it, or if a woman collaborated with the other two writers or something. But since it doesn't seem like there was any input from a woman, the film turned out exactly like I thought it would.
When you say that, what do you mean?
Two characters tortured under the weight of patriarchy.
Yeah.
It's like we see that all the time. I get it.
Yeah, we know it. Yes.
Yes. And it's like, and then the ending, it was just whatever.
I would say like the filmmakers who risked something, who told stories that maybe were risky or tried something different, like Passing, like Flee, like Summer of Soul. Those were all, looking at archival footage, looking at a novel from the 1920s, looking at a story set in a land you've never been to, and then telling it in animation. These are all risks that these filmmakers took, and in the stories that they chose to tell. So, and then I think that those movies were the ones that were interesting. And your mileage may vary about which one is better than the other. But it's the filmmakers who look just inwardly. I'm an actor in LA. I'm going to tell a story about LA people during a pandemic. Those were the movies that didn't work for me, that were too familiar, that you needed to maybe look at a bigger world than just your world, and that would pay off as it paid off for these other filmmakers.
Carlos Aguilar is the one who, he continually pushes international cinema. You push international cinema. So it encouraged me to look more at international cinema and documentary. And, I saw quite a bit of foreign cinema that I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
The foreign films that I saw were a lot better than the English narratives.
But I'm glad, it's Sundance. A film festival is always good because you get to see what's coming up. And so I'm glad we got this opportunity to watch all these movies. And I'm glad Sundance made it so easy. I hope you enjoyed this episode about Sundance. If I would say one movie, you got to put Passing and Flee. That's two, but that's okay. Valerie, if our listeners want to see one movie from Sundance, what would be your choice?
I think it's important to see Summer of Soul.
Summer of Soul.
Because I love Flee, but nobody knew about Summer of Soul. Nobody, hardly anybody knew about it, except for the people that were there.
Yeah.
And so I think for learning purposes, education, a bit of Black history, Summer of Soul is probably what you should see.
Yeah. And what a way to end on that movie. It hasn't been bought yet, but I think it will be, and we will hear soon where it will land. And
I hasn't picked it up.
Yeah. I think that the market is a little bit slow, but it will pick up. I'm sure this one, it's such an audience movie too. It's going to be picked up. So Valerie, before we go, tell our listeners where they can find you and your work.
You can find me, I have a website, which is Valerie Complex, all one word.com, ValerieComplex.com. And I'm on Twitter at Valerie Complex and Instagram at Valerie_Complex.
Thank you, Valerie. And you can find me on Twitter at ME_says and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Sundays with Kate. I will be back to regular programming with another Cate Blanchett movie next time. Thank you so much for listening.